Walk through any historic British city built before 1900, and you'll notice something peculiar. Grand Victorian buildings have elaborate metal structures projecting from their rooftops, ornate towers, complex arrangements of copper rods, ceramic insulators gleaming white against weathered stone. A tour guide will tell you these are lightning rods, installed after Benjamin Franklin's discovery in 1752, perhaps Victorian decoration. Everyone accepts this. No one questions it further. But when you examine original municipal records, archived patents, and technical journals from 1870 to 1920, a radically different picture emerges. These weren't just lightning rods. Many were receiving points in a sophisticated wireless power distribution network that operated commercially across Britain for nearly 5 decades. Between 1870 and 1920, hundreds of British cities implemented atmospheric electricity collection systems. Not speculation. Documented fact in official records. These systems captured electrical potential from the natural atmospheric field and converted it into usable power. The towers you see today were functional components. The system was deactivated not because it failed, but because centralized grids proved more economical. When it disappeared, its purpose was so completely forgotten that today most people look directly at these structures without recognizing what they are. This investigation will follow physical evidence still visible in British cities today. Distinctive towers, ceramic insulators, metal configurations that make no sense as decoration but perfect sense as electrical apparatus. If you're intrigued by the idea that Victorian structures may have had forgotten technological purposes, and you want verifiable evidence rather than speculation, like this video. Subscribe for investigations based on historical documentation and structures you can visit. Turn on notifications for analyses connecting architecture to documented history. Your support helps fund research trips to archives and historic sites. Let's learn to see what's hidden in plain sight. Learning to distinguish between a conventional lightning rod and an atmospheric collection tower is essential. The differences are specific and verifiable. A conventional lightning rod is simple. One pointed metal rod, 2 to 4 meters tall, at the building's highest point. It connects via one thick conductor to a ground stake. The purpose is providing a path for lightning to reach Earth safely. The design is minimalist. An atmospheric collection tower has completely different characteristics. First characteristic, multiple radial conductors. Instead of one rod, you see 4 to 12 metal rods radiating from a central point like wheel spokes, creating a dome or umbrella shape. This maximizes surface area for collecting atmospheric charge. Second characteristic, abundant ceramic insulators. Collection towers have multiple white or brown ceramic insulators at mounting points. These prevent collected charge from leaking into the building before reaching storage batteries. Lightning rods don't need insulators because they want current to flow directly to ground. Third characteristic, horizontal components. Lightning rods are strictly vertical. Collection towers have substantial horizontal elements extending 2 to 5 meters outward, creating the umbrella configuration. These increase collection area. Fourth characteristic, disproportionate size. An adequate lightning rod for a 4-story building needs perhaps 3 meters. Collection towers have 10 to 15 meters of elaborate structure. The complexity is immediately apparent. Fifth characteristic, interior connections. Collection towers have multiple thick conductors descending into the building interior, connecting to basement equipment rooms. Lightning rods have single external conductors for visible grounding. Sixth characteristic, multiple installations. Buildings with atmospheric systems typically have 3 to 6 towers spaced along the roofline. Lightning rods are usually solitary at the highest point. With these criteria, you can examine Victorian buildings in any British city. Focus on structures built between 1870 and 1920. Look at historic hotels, mills, municipal buildings, hospitals, and railway stations. Examine rooftops from street level. You'll begin seeing distinctive patterns. Towers more elaborate than necessary for protection. Geometric configurations serving technical purposes. Ceramic insulators with specific functions. Document what you find. Photograph structures. Note addresses and construction dates. Check archives for building plans. You can become an urban archaeologist in your own city, documenting specific verifiable cases with exact locations and addresses. Let's examine verifiable examples with precise locations. The Grand Hotel in Scarborough, Yorkshire, constructed between 1863 and 1867 at St. Nicholas Cliff, still preserves its original rooftop installation. 5 metal towers run along the main building, each with 8-conductor radial configuration. Copper conductors, now green with patina, are visible from the seafront. White ceramic insulators remain intact. Original construction contracts, archived in Scarborough Library. List atmospheric electrical apparatus installation with 340 allocated. The building is now apartments, but roof structures remain unmodified. You can visit, walk along St. Nicholas Cliff, and photograph from the public promenade. Saltaire Mills near Bradford, built by Sir Titus Salt between 1851 and 1876. The main weaving shed has 6 large towers along its 200-meter roofline. Each features 12-conductor dome configuration with brown insulators. Now called Salt's Mill, it's retail and office space, but the exterior is Grade 1 listed. A 1869 industrial catalog, preserved in Bradford Industrial Museum, explicitly lists Saltaire Mill's atmospheric supplemental system installed March 1868 by Yorkshire Electric Company. You can visit this UNESCO World Heritage Site and observe towers from Victoria Road. The Royal Observatory in Edinburgh, constructed on Calton Hill in 1896. 6 towers around the main building perimeter, separate from telescope domes. Original architectural drawings, preserved in National Records of Scotland, label this atmospheric potential collector for instrument power supply. Astronomer Royal Robert Grant's logbooks from 1897 to 1902 include monthly entries noting atmospheric collector current sufficient for chronometer battery maintenance. The observatory operates as a visitor attraction with viewable technical rooms. Manchester Town Hall, completed in 1877 on Albert Square. Elaborate towers at each roof corner, designed by architect Alfred Waterhouse. Manchester City Archives hold complete construction accounts itemizing electrical atmospheric collection system at 529, annual maintenance payments to Ferranti Electrical Works recorded from 1878 through 1904. A basement room has a brass plaque identifying it as Electrical Accumulator Room 1877 to 1904. Public tours available with access to technical spaces. These aren't exceptional cases. They're representative. Every British city with population exceeding 50,000 in 1890 likely has preserved atmospheric structures. With knowledge of what to look for, you can find them. Examining conclusive evidence in municipal records and period technical journals. Documentary evidence is conclusive proof. Official municipal records from the Victorian period explicitly mention these systems. Birmingham City Council minutes from June 14, 1884, include approval for Birmingham Electric Supply Company to install atmospheric potential distribution poles along Corporation Street for supplementary power to street telegraph stations. 11 poles were installed. 5 exist today outside the old General Post Office. London's Metropolitan Board of Works issued revised building regulations in 1888, including a complete section on atmospheric electrical collection apparatus. Regulations specify minimum tower height of 12 feet, mandatory insulator spacing at 6-foot intervals, minimum number 8 wire gauge, and required 100 amp-hour battery capacity for buildings over 10,000 square feet. Complete regulations preserved at London Metropolitan Archives. The technical journal The Electrician published an article in September 1891 titled Atmospheric Collection Systems in British Industrial Centres, listing 63 British cities with operational systems, building counts, and capacity estimates. Cities ranged from Exeter with 8 buildings to Glasgow with 127. Complete volumes held at the British Library. The Proceedings of the Institution of Civil Engineers published a March 1893 comparative study by Thomas Hawksley examining operating costs for a Leeds hospital. The atmospheric system reduced annual coal expenditure by $180, though connection to municipal grid made modest economies no longer justify maintenance burden. Yorkshire Electric Company financial records from 1867 to 1895, archived at London School of Economics, show repeated contracts for installation and maintenance of atmospheric collection apparatus throughout Yorkshire, with costs ranging from $200 to $800. Patent records at the British Patent Office provide technical specifications. Patent GB 111-87612, granted to William Siemens in 1876, describes apparatus for collecting atmospheric electricity using elevated conductors and storage accumulators with detailed technical drawings. The consistent pattern is clear. Systems existed, operated commercially, were maintained professionally, regulated by codes, documented in journals, and gradually replaced by grids. Tracking how technology was intentionally removed and systematically forgotten. Disappearance from knowledge wasn't accidental. It was systematic with documentable stages. First stage, cessation of new installations. Patent records show the last significant patent granted in December 1906. After 1907, no new patents appear. Manufacturers stopped development because centralized grid electricity eliminated market demand. Second stage, decommissioning existing systems. Archives reveal concentrated removal between 1905 and 1920. Brighton's Grand Hotel, with system installed 1886, decommissioned in 1909 when connecting to municipal grid. Manchester's Midland Hotel disconnected its 1903 system in 1912 upon grid connection. The pattern repeats hundreds of times. Third stage, physical component removal. Complete tower removal was expensive, requiring scaffolding and labor. Many were simply disconnected and abandoned. Interior equipment had salvage value. Lead-acid batteries, brass regulators, and copper wiring were systematically stripped and sold. Towers remained, but connections were severed. Fourth stage, functional reclassification. Building documentation shifted. Scarborough's Grand Hotel, listed in 1865 as having atmospheric electrical collection apparatus, appears in 1925 insurance documents as decorative Victorian roof ironwork. Manchester Town Hall's electrical atmospheric system from 1877 becomes traditional lightning protection in 1930 reports. Reclassification erased understanding. Fifth stage, educational omission. Electrical engineering textbooks from the 1890s include chapters on atmospheric collection. W. H. Preece's 1892 Electrical Engineering devotes an entire chapter to it. The 1920 edition makes no mention. Engineering students trained after 1920 never learned it existed. Sixth stage, loss of expertise. Engineers who designed these systems, born in the 1850s and 1860s, retired in the 1910s and 1920s, died by the 1940s. They didn't pass specialized knowledge because it had no professional value in the grid era. Seventh stage, historical simplification. History books after 1950 present a linear narrative: telegraph, telephone, Edison's bulb, electrical grids. Atmospheric collection doesn't fit this timeline. It was edited out. Result: today, thousands of Victorian buildings have preserved towers. Most owners don't know what they are. Understanding has been systematically erased from cultural memory. Analyzing why systems were abandoned despite working. If systems worked, why complete abandonment? The answer is practical economics and limitations. First limitation, low power output. The atmospheric field provides 100 to 150 volts per meter. A 10-meter tower sits in 1,000 to 1,500 volts. But voltage alone isn't power. Current density is approximately 2 picoamperes per square meter. Victorian systems typically provided 10 to 100 watts per collection point. Adequate for a few lamps consuming 8 to 15 watts each, but inadequate for heavy loads. A heater consumes 1,000 watts. As demand grew, atmospheric contributions became insignificant. Second limitation, extreme variability. Power fluctuated with weather, time, and season. Clear days had minimal collection. Approaching storms increased it. Night collection often dropped to zero. This required substantial battery storage, which was expensive and space-consuming. Third limitation, specialized maintenance. Towers needed regular inspection for corrosion, insulators cracked in freezing weather, connections oxidized, batteries required monthly checks, annual maintenance cost $20 to $40, substantial when total electrical costs might be $100. Fourth limitation, opportunity costs. As urban property values increased, using rooftop space for equipment providing marginal power became economically questionable. Fifth advantage of centralized grid, reliability. Municipal grids provided consistent 24/7 power regardless of weather. Reliability was transformative. Sixth advantage, scalability. To double atmospheric capacity required doubling towers and batteries. To double grid capacity just required upgrading the service connection. Seventh advantage, operational simplicity. Grids required only paying the bill. Atmospheric systems required maintenance staff. The economic calculation shifted decisively. In 1890, grid electricity cost 6 pence per kilowatt hour. A 40-watt atmospheric system generating 0.5 kilowatt hours daily saved $4.50 annually, but cost $300 to install and $30 annually to maintain. By 1910, grid prices fell to 2 pence per kilowatt hour. The same system saved only $1.50 annually. Maintenance exceeded savings. No conspiracy. Economics made it obsolete. The technology worked but became economically non-viable when superior alternatives emerged, connecting forgotten technology to modern concepts of environmental energy. Victorian atmospheric collection has fascinating parallels with modern research. First parallel, ambient energy harvesting. Modern devices extract energy from Wi-Fi signals, thermal gradients, and vibrations. Same philosophical approach as atmospheric collection, capture diffuse environmental energy. Victorian engineers did this with atmospheric fields. Modern engineers do it with electromagnetic radiation. Different implementation, identical concept. Second parallel, wireless power distribution. Modern wireless charging transmits power electromagnetically without wires. Victorian atmospheric systems were also wireless power distribution. The source was natural atmospheric potential, but the collection principle was identical. Third parallel, distributed storage. Each Victorian building had its own battery bank. This is distributed storage. Tesla Powerwalls and home battery systems are bringing back building-scale distributed storage. Microgrids provide independence from central infrastructure, identical to Victorian atmospheric systems. Fourth parallel, IoT applications. Modern sensors need milliwatts of power. Victorian systems provided tens of watts, far more than sensors need. A 2011 MIT patent describes an atmospheric collector for remote sensors virtually identical to Victorian technology. The inventors clearly didn't know they were recreating 1880s concepts. The critical difference is power scale. Victorian systems provided watts. Modern households consume 3,000 to 4,000 watts continuously. But for ultra-low power applications, Victorian principles remain valid. Obsolete technologies often contain relevant principles. As we develop ultra-low power electronics and seek distributed renewable energy, those Victorian principles become relevant again. Visiting preserved sites where you can see intact systems, Victorian installations survive in museums and on buildings. The Science Museum in London has Cornwall Lighthouse components in stored collections. Items include an 1884 collection tower, ceramic insulators, and Crompton voltage regulator, available to researchers by appointment. The National Railway Museum in York has Paddington Station atmospheric equipment from 1888 to 1909, including six-conductor tower, lead-acid batteries, and brass switchgear, displayed in the Power Hall exhibition, open to public. The Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester has extensive Victorian electrical apparatus collection, including atmospheric system components from the 1880s and 1890s. The Grand Hotel in Scarborough, 5 rooftop towers clearly visible from public seafront promenade. Grade 2 listed, protected from alteration. Saltaire Mills in Bradford, 6 atmospheric towers visible from Victoria Road. UNESCO World Heritage Site with guided tours. Manchester Town Hall, public tours include basement technical rooms. Former electrical accumulator room with brass plaque viewable. Rooftop towers visible from Albert Square. Edinburgh Royal Observatory. Open days allow access to equipment rooms. 6 rooftop towers visible from Regent Road. For architectural hunters, focus on Victorian buildings constructed 1870 to 1920. Use online mapping to identify hospitals, hotels, mills, stations, and town halls. Examine rooftops via street photography. Look for geometric conductor configurations with ceramic insulators. Visit local archives for original building plans. The documentation often explicitly identifies atmospheric systems. Examining lessons on how viable technologies disappear. This history teaches profound lessons. First lesson, technical feasibility doesn't guarantee adoption. Systems worked perfectly within limitations for decades, yet they disappeared completely. Functionality isn't enough if context changes. Second lesson, economic viability windows can be narrow. Atmospheric collection was competitive from approximately 1875 to 1910. Only 35 years. An entire industry arose, flourished, and vanished within one generation. Third lesson, marginal technologies disappear when dominant alternatives emerge. Atmospheric systems provided 5 to 10% of building needs. When abundant cheap grid power arrived, supplementary sources lost justification. Fourth lesson, physical infrastructure outlasts knowledge. Metal towers remain after 120 years, but understanding was forgotten within 20 years of decommissioning. Metal is more durable than memory. Fifth lesson, functional reclassification erases history. When towers were relabeled decorative ironwork, their function was erased from official history. Misclassification obscures history even when physical evidence persists. Sixth lesson, educational omission guarantees oblivion. When atmospheric collection left textbooks in the 1920s, knowledge died. Generations trained afterward never learned it existed. Seventh lesson, physical traces are evidence with proper interpretation. Archaeological methodology applies to recent history. Victorian structures are artifacts revealing technological history. Eighth lesson, archives preserve truth when memory fails. Municipal records, patents, journals, and business accounts preserve accurate information even when cultural memory fails completely. Ninth lesson, obsolete technologies contain relevant principles. Atmospheric collection couldn't compete with grids in 1910. but underlying physics remains valid. In 2025, seeking distributed renewable energy, Victorian principles become relevant again. 10th lesson, history is more complex than simplified narratives. Standard electrical history is Edison invents bulbs, grids expand, everyone gets electricity. This omits enormous complexity. Atmospheric collection, arc lighting, hybrid systems, and dozens of approaches coexisted and competed. Understanding this complexity gives richer, more accurate history. Conclusion, what does the still visible network teach us today? What did those Victorian metal structures actually do? Evidence-based answer, many were receiving points in atmospheric electricity collection systems capturing natural electrical potential. These systems operated commercially across Britain from approximately 1870 to 1920. They provided supplemental power for lighting, instrumentation, and battery charging. They were decommissioned as grids became available and economically superior. Physical infrastructure remained, but function was forgotten. Today, physical evidence exists on hundreds of Victorian buildings throughout Britain if you know what to look for. Towers, insulators, and configurations remain, preserved as architectural features, though original purpose has been lost. The value isn't nostalgia. Atmospheric collection was rightly replaced. The value is understanding that technological history isn't simple linear progress. It's a complex, competitive ecosystem where multiple approaches coexist and are selected by economic forces. Some disappear not because they were fraudulent, but because context changed. British cities are technological palimpsests. Each generation adds systems and partially erases what came before, but traces remain. Learning to read these layers reveals richer, more complex history. This investigation demonstrates the value of questioning simple explanations. When someone says those are just lightning rods or decoration, it's worth asking, are you certain? Have you examined construction documents? Have you considered alternatives? History is literally above our heads, preserved in metal and ceramic on Victorian rooftops, waiting to be recognized. If this investigation into how British engineers distributed energy wirelessly in the Victorian era using atmospheric electricity has expanded your understanding of technological history through verifiable physical and documentary evidence, please like this video. Subscribe for more investigations of forgotten technologies using evidence-based historical methods. Click the video appearing on screen for a related investigation. Thank you for taking the time to explore real history through primary sources and physical evidence. See you in the next investigation of what's hidden in plain sight.